right, Larry, thank you for being with us today, my friend.
Brett, what's going on, man?
Dude, doing good over here, living that dad life, man. Just doing my best. I don't have four. I've only got one. We got a second one on the way, so I'm a little bit behind you.
Dude, congrats. So, when do you guys do?
October 1st, so
All right.
coming in hot
Oh, dude. So,
for
like,
sure.
I'm thinking you guys celebrated a little bit too much on New Year's, huh?
I think that's pretty good timing right there. That might have been
Yeah.
it. Honestly, I don't think we've done the exact math, but somewhere around there for sure. I don't know if we'll make it to four like yourself. I think we may call it after 2, 3, maybe. I don't know. 4. I give you a lot of credit, boy. That sounds like a lot of moving pieces.
It is. I love it though, man. I wouldn't change a thing. Like speaking of conceiving, like on holidays, like so we thought we were done, and then we because there's a 6-year gap between my second born and my third, so we weren't careful. We thought we were done, and then we got pregnant with the third, and
Sure.
and I was just like, and then we were just like, oh my god, like that was like the biggest like change was going from 2 to 3, and then on Memorial Day, I think it was a year and a half or a year later, we just like partied a little too hard with some neighbors, came home, had a good time, and my wife was like, wow, like you weren't careful, like what if I get pregnant? I'm like, you won't be pregnant, you'll be fine. And dude, I come home, like it was probably a month or two later, I come home from like a business trip because at the time I had a full-time job, and there was a Valentine's Day card on my pillow, and she was laying there. And dude, like if you could take a chapter out of my book of what not to do, this is one for the I'm surprised she didn't like hit me. So like she's laying there in bed and she's got this smile on her face as I walked in, because my flight I think got in late that night, and I see this card sitting, and she's like I got you a card, and I was like, oh, that's so nice. And she does that, so I open it up, and it's like it's like in the middle of summer, and it's a Valentine's Day card. And I was like, why do I have a Valentine's Day card? This is really weird. And then I start reading it, and she's like, and we'll have a new edition right around Valentine's Day. And I'm like,
Oof.
I look at her, and this is what I did. I'm not kidding. I go, are you pregnant? And she's kind of like grinned, and she's like, yeah. And I was like, no, 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 you're not. Like, and she's like, I am, and I really like your reaction. But dude, I was so blown away. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way. No way.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, you guys clearly got some good systems going on there, because I feel like usually when I see people with like 3 or 4 kids, they look exhausted. They're wearing a t-shirt from 3 days ago. Look at you. You're like, looking sharp. The beard's faded up. I mean, everything's looking sharp over there. So you guys obviously got some good systems going on that we'll have to. So I'm curious, man, like, when did the lightning bolt kind of hit you where you decided, holy cow, I got to start a podcast and teach people, teach guys how to be their best selves so that they can show up more fully as fathers? Like, when did this idea hit you?
It's really odd, man. If you would have told me 10 years ago, like, hey, you're gonna leave your really lucrative career in medical device sales and go make a living on a microphone and help other men be a good father and husband, I would have laughed. I would have said that's hilarious, right? But here we are. And but I'll tell you, like, I actually started a blog called The Good Dad Project back in 2013, and the bolt of lightning was for me, like, my childhood was really chaotic, very unique experience. I'll give you like the 30,000 foot view. My mom and biological father married 1971. They got married super young. They were like 21. 4 years later, in 1975, they had me. 9 months after they had me, they went through a horrible divorce, really, really bad. My dad was gone. Right. So, I was about 4 years old, and it was just me and my mom, and I didn't know any better. And the funny thing was, I was in preschool. I still remember this to this day. I was in preschool, and I remember guys coming to pick up their kids. I knew what a dad was, and I knew we didn't have one. Now, I didn't really care. I was just like, but in my mind, moms go out and find dads. And my mom hadn't found my dad yet, and that was fine. The first time she ever brought a guy home to meet me was right around that same age. And I remember her saying, like, hey, I'm going to have a friend over for dinner tonight. He's a very special friend of mine. I work with him, and I want you to meet him. That was her way of saying, I'm dating someone at work, and I want you to meet him. It's time.
Sure.
So, like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, she found him. She found the dad, right?
Right.
So like this guy comes walking in my house and like literally he's in a 3-piece suit. He was a white collar data software engineer, and I shook his hand and the very first words out of my mouth was, "Are you going to be my dad?"
Oh
And
boy.
like I was just like beaming, like, and I literally remember I think my mom like gasped. She was like, like, you know, and
Don't
then
say
like
that.
right, and then he like kind of like awkwardly laughed, and like, but 6 months later they got married. They stayed married for 6 years. He was very abusive. He was an alcoholic. My mom and him fought horribly. I think my mom liked the idea of him,
Sure.
but yeah, it didn't really go anywhere. And then after they got divorced, I was like, well, wait a second. Like this dude came around when I was 4. I know about the birds and the bees now. Like do I have somebody else out there that's a dad? And my mom was like, yeah, I was actually married before. I was like, what? I had no idea. And so fast forward 2 years later, I'm 12. I accidentally met my father, my real father. Like it was
No, you
total
just like
fluke.
saw him out in public and you knew it was him.
No, it's kind of a long story, but it's really interesting. I'll make it super fast. So I'm 12 years old. I
Okay.
go up to our local like rec center to play
Mm-hmm.
basketball with one of my friends. And I knew my dad's name. That was it. I knew his name was Larry Boyd, and that was it. And but I didn't know where he was or anything like that. And so I'm getting my basketball from this clerk behind the desk, me and my buddy, and I see the clerk look outside and he goes, "Oh, here comes Mrs. Boyd with the hockey payment," because my dad played hockey up there.
Oh,
And I was
okay.
like, and I've always been a curious kid. Always, I ask lots of questions, and I go, "What name did you say?" And he repeated it. I said, "Her husband plays hockey up here." Is that what you said? He said, "Yeah." I go, "What's his name?" And he goes, "Larry." And I was like, "Oh my God." I was like, "I
Whoa.
think that woman is my dad's wife."
Get out of
So
here.
I like just sort of went to the side and waited for her. She gave the check, and I went up to her. I tapped her on the shoulder. I'm like, "Excuse me." And she goes, "Yeah." And I go, "What's your name?" And she's like, "Lisa." And I was like, "Lisa Boyd?" And she looks at me like I'm nuts, right? And
Right.
I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Yeah." And I go, "Are you married to a guy named Larry?" And she's like, "Yes." And then you saw like she put the pieces
She put it
together.
together right there.
And I just said it. I was like, "I'm pretty sure your husband might be my dad." And she looks at me and she's like, she like it kind of melted. And
Yeah.
she goes, "Sweetheart, are you Larry?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And she's like, "Sweetheart, would you like to talk to your dad?" And I was like, "I would love to." And she took me around the corner, put a quarter in the payphone. Literally, this is what she did. She's like, "Yeah, so
Whoa.
I'm up here at the Civic Center. I just made the hockey payment. I ran into your son. He wants to talk to you."
Here you go.
And just hands the phone over.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so, yeah, dude. And so I talked to my dad. I don't even remember what we said. I just remember he was super nervous, and so was I. But we decided to meet like a week later, and we did. And we had this relationship for like 6 months. And he lived 3 miles from us. I had no idea. And so we had this relationship for like 6 months. He was remarried, had 2-year-old sons. I had at the time like a 2-year-old half brother. And he came to all my little league games, and we hung out every week, and it was cool. And then after about 6 months, it just got, I think, too complicated for him, and he was out again.
Sure.
He just left again. So that put me in a dark place. My mom continued to date. She got remarried again. She got remarried. She got remarried a total of 3 times. Just dated like it was a revolving door of like the same guy, just different name, different face. Like they were all partiers, all abusers, like just absolute train wrecks. I think my mom was just super attracted to men that she hoped that she could save,
Right.
right? And that was like my upbringing. And so fast forward till I'm 30. I'm married 2 years at this point. My first son is on the way, and I'm in a Starbucks for a business meeting. And who came walking in for his morning coffee? My father.
There he is.
And I'm just like, oh my God. I was like, I hadn't seen him since I was 18. But that serendipitous moment turned into what's now 19 years of a relationship that we have. I just went out to dinner with my youngest brother last night. He is literally one of the closest relationships I have on the planet. Like, we're so much alike. We weren't even raised together, but we're crazy. We are so alike. It's nuts. We even look alike. And, but I would say the bolt of lightning really hit when my oldest was 6. And at the time, my second born was 4. And it was really, I had a really bad moment with my 4-year-old. I spanked him, and I spanked him out of anger. And I made a promise to myself that I would never hit my kids out of anger because I was hit a lot. And that was it. That was all I needed to just be like, I got to get my shit together, man. I gotta figure this out. And I started just learning, and I started blogging, and it was really just the reason to answer your question, like the podcast in 2015, the blog wasn't going anywhere. And it was mostly just a therapeutic project for me, but
Sure.
I didn't really care. I wasn't doing it for anybody else. I
Right, it
was
was for
just doing
you.
it for me. Yeah. And I just decided, I was like, you know what? I was like, I think I'm just going to start a podcast because like, I think I'll learn more by talking to experts.
Sure.
And so I did. And like, I joke about it, but I wrote down 10 ideas and 10 guests that I want to get on the show. And after that, I was like, after this, I'm on God's good humor. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen after this. But as you and I are recording, it's going to be next Friday that I will actually have published 1,200 episodes of
Woo.
Dadhood podcast. So it's
Boy,
crazy.
that's a lot of volume, my friend.
It's a lot.
That's a lot. You are churning out at an absolutely impressive cadence right there. I got to say. I mean, I think the statistic is most podcasters don't get past 12, right? So I think so I think you're a little ahead of the pace there.
Pod burn, right? That's what I've heard.
Yeah, pod burn. I've heard someone. There's another phrase out there. I mean, listen, I hear you. Sure, in those early going, days, and myself too. I'm approaching 100 episodes. I'm certainly, I'm certainly far behind yourself as far as the total numbers go. But there are definitely times where you're like, boy, this show ain't growing as fast as I wish it. You figure 12 minutes in, you're going to be the next Tim Ferriss. Like that's how I imagine this happening. Right. And I would say honestly, just in the past couple of months, I finally started to really see some some upward trajectory. But it does take a while, and it's unlike any other platform where Instagram, you can post a reel that goes viral and you've got 30,000 followers, right. A day later. That doesn't really happen in the podcast world, man. It is like a slow burn. You got to earn it every step of the way here. And I got to give you a lot of credit for building the audience that you have, getting to the number of episodes that you're about to step up to there. And this is just kind of like a personal question I'm curious about. So producing as many episodes as you're producing for any content creator out there, I think this would be an interesting piece of information. You're putting out like 3 a week right now?
3 a week. Yep.
3 a week right now. Are you blocking off like days to just film episodes all day, or do you just kind of sporadically film when your guests are available? I think any content creator could learn something from you and the amount of volume that you're putting out.
Mondays. So I literally have it like down to a science. I do 3 or 4 interviews on Mondays. And then I literally like it's back to back. I use that as my fasting day.
Cool.
As well, because I'm like super clear and productive and all that. And then I do actually record one now every Tuesday. And that's only because I can't fit all of those. I can't fit another one in on Mondays, but I just started, I switched up, rebranded our Wednesday show, which used to be a Q&A. Mm-hmm. And we used to like stream it right through our community and take questions almost like a radio show. And what I've done is I've rebranded that now, and it's brand new. It's called Wednesday Member Spotlight. So one thing I've learned, and I used to do this when I couldn't get many guests on the show, but we had our mastermind community. So every Friday I would spotlight a member and their story. And that got such great feedback. And like some of the feedback that I got was like things like, man, I like Jocko Willink and I like Matthew McConaughey and John Bernthal and all these people that come on podcasts, but like, it's hard for me to relate to that kind of guy. Right. Sure. And so when I would do the member spotlight and the guy would just share his story, right, of things that he was struggling with, and then things when he came into our ecosystem, what he learned and what he did different and like what he's doing now, like men like loved that. They're like, dude, I can't relate to Jocko, but I can relate to Tim. Sure. Who's a member. So I started doing that again. So I record now on Tuesdays. I always spotlight a member and their story, and just so the men can like hear, because that's how human beings learn, is through story. Yeah,
100%. Very cool. Yeah. And I think honestly that is something that I pick up whenever I interview someone who's really producing content in any fashion at a very high clip. It's usually that they do block off whatever it is, a couple days a month or 1 day a week. It's not like a sporadic thing. They fit it in where they can. It's like, this is the day that I record and I try and jam it all in and I just get in the zone and I just talk for 10 straight hours. I interviewed, who was it? Travis Chappell, Travis Makes Friends. And he does the same thing. He just blocks off 2 days a month and he just burns through all of his recording in 2 days. And I think that's a good piece of advice for any aspiring content creator is pick a few days a month and really just try and bang it out, as opposed to trying to fit it in here and there during your week. Because you're going to have fires to put out. You're probably running other businesses. You might have a 9 to 5, and you're going to struggle to fit it into your schedule unless you
Yeah.
really just block off a good amount of time there. So I kind of wanted to touch on a couple things, and I want to get down to some nitty gritty dad stuff, right? Because
Yeah, man.
that is your forte. It's what you've been studying and speaking about for years. And I'm curious, why do you think, at least this is something that I've been seeing a lot in my friends, and I'm in my late 30s. Why do you think guys these days are kind of latching on to that like lone wolf mentality? I feel like I see more and more guys into their late 30s and their 40s, not even really pursuing a family or kids, and kind of pushing it off longer and longer into their lives. I don't know if you see this as well, but I know it's something I've seen in my personal life, and just curious about your thoughts on that.
So you're talking about lone wolfing it, like even like no family, like you're
Right.
not married. Yeah. I don't. I have a theory around the lone wolf, like for guys who get married
Okay.
and who have kids and all that. But like as far as like pushing it off, like I think if you look at like like our generation of parents, like me and you, it was kind of people got married young, and I think that was kind of like the way society was. Like a lot of people like didn't even go to college, like they would get married a few years out of high school and stuff like that. Like my mom got married when she was 21. I think if you ask a lot of parents, they got married in their early 20s, and that's just what like everybody was doing, and like that's what their friends were doing, and like it was almost like abnormal if you weren't. Like I
Sure.
came like to picture somebody in their I remember my mom's sister, so my aunt, she was not married, and I just remember like even my friends or people around be like, she's not married. Like, why? That's weird. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but
Sure.
now it's like, if you're a millennial, like it's pretty normal that like, oh yeah, I'm single, and you don't even really think twice about it. So I think it's more of a societal thing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Um,
I agree with that. It depends on where you live too, right? Like New York
yeah,
City, if you're in Manhattan and you're even thinking about having kids before 30, people look at you sideways. You know
yeah,
what
like
I
what's
mean?
wrong with you?
In the Midwest, I think it's probably a little bit different. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I always thought that was kind of an interesting fact, at least that I've seen, recently. And another thing that I want to kind of touch on was like, what practices do you think maybe that you learned on that, or that you've implemented yourself? Like what kind of daily or weekly practices can we implement to build stronger family bonds?
Yeah, so I think it's such a good question, and I'll give you one really simple one, and I think we'll set the tone here by just stating what the needs of your family is. Like a lot of people just, and I had to learn this too. Like I didn't know this. I'll never forget that when one of my coaches asked me, he's like, "Hey, do you know what your wife's three needs are in a relationship?" And I'm like, to feel loved, cherished, appreciated, valued. Like I just
Right.
guessed, right?
To feel loved and loved.
Right, right. Like that's what you do, right? And he's like, no, he's like, it's actually she needs to feel seen, heard, and safe. And I was like, okay. I was like, that makes sense, like because like the worst thing I can do to my wife is like tune her out when she's talking. Like it's like a slap in the face for
For
her, right?
sure.
And also it's like all these other things that she does that we simply don't say out loud. That like my wife right now, she's going to the grocery store and she just texted me and she's like, hey, I'm at the grocery store. Do you need anything? So when she comes home, I'm gonna be like, hey, just thank you so much for checking in with me. Thank you for thinking of me while you're at the grocery store to even ask. Like, I really, really appreciate you doing that. Right. So, like, to see, and she's like, oh, you're welcome. Like, that makes her day. Right.
Right. Right.
And the cool thing, too, like, this is where I think we kind of hit the easy button as men, husbands, and fathers is, our kids have the same needs as our wives, so they need to feel seen, heard, and safe. And it doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl, and it doesn't matter if they're an older teenager. My 18-year-old still needs to feel seen, heard, and safe. So I think we can do that through one thing in our family that we abide by is like connection, connection, connection. Like, and we, our motto in this family is experiences over stuff, adventure over things, right? And memories is something that we invest in, and I would say also conversational excellence, right? You probably won't ever hear me ask my kids or my wife, how was your day in this house? Because like that's just it's a default question that doesn't require any brain power to ask it, and it certainly doesn't require any brain power or connection to answer it because it's a one word answer. So I'm really, really big on the quality of your life, and the quality of your relationships resides in the quality of your questions. So I go to every conversation with curiosity and appreciation. I mean, not every conversation, because there are times you have to, lecture, or you have to have a talk or whatever. But you'll find me asking my kids usually 3 questions per day. And that is, what was the best part of your day? Right. Because I want them to share something with me that they're proud of, because that creates connection. When a kid feels that their dad is genuinely interested in their life, not just how was your day, how was your school, how was school, what'd you learn, do you have homework, check the box, check the box, check the box. But when they get to share something with me that they're super excited about, that creates a tremendous connection, right? Because an interested father is interesting, right, to the kids. Another question that I ask, I call this you're creating an environment where you're your kid's 3 a.m. call. And what I mean by that is, like, when all hell breaks loose or shit is hitting the oscillating fan and your kid's on the other side, you're the phone call. Like,
Yeah.
and even if it's their fault, right? So, like, I like to create an environment of what we call psychological safety, where, like, hey, anything, you can say anything to me, even the tough stuff, and we're gonna be okay, right? So, like, I'll ask them, what'd you fail at today? Like, tell me something you're not proud of. Like, tell me something that challenged you today. Did you do anything bad or dishonest today? Right. And you'll see it, the look on their face, like, right. So, but we have another motto in this house, which is your honesty and ownership is celebrated, not punished. So, like, for instance, if my kid's like, hey man, like, yeah, I got an F on the science test today. And there's a part of me, right, that just wants to lecture and be like, wait, what do you mean you got an F? Like, come on, man. Like, I've seen you on YouTube. I've seen you doing this, like, wasting your time. Like, you weren't studying for it. Like, I knew you weren't studying for it. Like, we don't, like,
Come on,
and
bro.
just,
Come on, bro.
but instead I'll be like, oh, I was like, man, I was like, well, that took some courage to tell me, huh? I was like, I appreciate you telling me that. So tell me what happened. Tell me more about that. I don't say, why did you get an F? I always say, replace the 3-letter word of why with 3 words. So instead of why'd you get the F? Oh, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that creates more connection and more psychological safety, where your kids it's an invite. Bring me in, right? Versus like, why?
Yeah.
So, and they will explain it. And the cool thing about it is like, we've been doing this now for so long, they'll just be super transparent. They'll be like, yeah, I really didn't study for it.
Right. There you
I'm
go.
like, okay.
Right. Hey, they're
I was
owning
like,
it. They're owning it.
yeah, I
And
was
that'll
like,
help them learn and, change their behavior in the future.
100%. And then the conversation that we'll continue to have is exactly that. So I'll be like, okay. I was like, well, thanks for the honesty. I was like, so let me ask you this. If you were to prepare for this test all over again, what would you do different? And they'll in detail tell me like what they would study, how much they would study, all these different things. And then I'll be like, okay. I was like, well, when is your next test? And they're like, it's actually this Friday. And I'll just simply say, well, sounds like you created a great plan for success. Like, what's stopping you from executing exactly what you just told me? And they're like, nothing. Like, I can do that. And I'm like, awesome. I think you can do it too. And then they'll do this and be like, Dad, thank you so much. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. Like, all I did was ask you a few questions, right? But it asking that question day after day, rep after rep, after, like, I've got an 18-year-old, who there are some times where he'll tell me things and I'll just look at him and I'm just like, I cannot believe he told me that. Like, I would never tell my parents something like that growing up, and I'll leave
Sure.
out what he would tell me. But you're creating this environment where you're the go-to. You're creating an environment where, like, this is my guy. This is who's safe to me. And when all hell's breaking loose, like, I can go to him and he's going to help me through it, not kill me with blame, shame, guilt, and pain. Right. So that's the second question. And then I always like to ask a future-based question. Like, I'll say, what are you most excited about tomorrow? Like, what do you got going on this week? Because what I want to do is I want to have a follow-up conversation.
Sure.
And there's no better way to do that than to get into their world and see what they're really excited about.
Very cool.
And then to make sure you ask that.
I love that. Great questions make for great relationships.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. And, luckily their dad asks, questions for a living. So he's pretty good. So he's pretty good at it. And I agree that the vague question, like, how was your day, doesn't enrich a relationship. It really doesn't. It does. It gets a one-word boring answer. Boring questions get boring answers, and they certainly don't strengthen bonds. And I think getting a little bit more specific and asking them, what was the best part of your day? Maybe what are you not so so proud of today and what are you excited about actually forces them to think and give a specific answer. I think that works in fathering, that works in any relationships. If you're at a barbecue and you ask someone, how's work going? You're going to get a boring answer. But if you ask them, hey, what's your average day look like these days?
Yeah.
That'll get a more specific, interesting answer where
Yeah.
someone can actually give you some details. So I totally agree. And I love that. Those three questions every day to ask it, your sons or your children, if you're out there, I think could really enrich a relationship pretty quickly and turn things around in a big way. So you're obviously a really hardworking guy, right? I mean, like you said, you're a hardworking dude. You got a lot going on. You were already very successful before you started this venture in sales, and now you're running a very successful podcast. You're a speaker. You're an author. You got a lot going on. I'm curious for a father who is very driven entrepreneur like yourself, and there's probably a lot of those listening right now too. How do we balance being a great father while also making a lot of time for our purpose and for our work?
It's not easy, and I don't think even you have to be an entrepreneur for it to
No,
be
you don't.
difficult, right? I mean, I think it's really hard. I think it's a mind game. It's really fascinating about my line of work, right? Because it's I love what I do, but it also screws with my head, and I'll tell you why. So like, I'm obviously not a perfect father. I fall on my face daily when it comes to making mistakes or not doing something, or like I've got my 16-year-old in the other room. I can't tell you the last time I asked him those three questions, and it's because like we're kind of in this season right now where we're like ships passing in the night. He's got football going on. He's with his friends a lot. Like I hardly see him lately. And when I do, like we talk, but it's not as deep as I would like it, right?
Sure.
And that screws with my head because I'm sitting here on this podcast telling people to do that, and I'm not even doing it with one of my kids right now. But so that the line of work that I'm in, like it's a constant reminder, and you hold yourself up so high to a standard that when you don't meet it, it almost becomes a standard you can never reach. And that's what I think kind of messes with my head sometimes, because I do screw up, and I screw up a lot. But I will tell you this, like I do recover faster, which is good. And I'm more aware of mistakes that I could be making, and I'm not, because I'm more aware. But to go back to your question, like how do we balance everything? I really think it comes down to boundaries. Like you have to, like, so for instance, I will, if I have a client, that wants to work with me one-on-one for 90 days is $5,000. And if a client's like, I can only meet with you in the evenings, that is not going to be a client.
Sure.
I'll pass that up. I'll be like, if you can't meet me, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., we cannot work together,
Sure.
because I will not work in the evenings. So like boundaries, right? And the other thing too, I think devices are a big one. I've partnered with a company called Aro, which is it's an app, and it helps positively disrupt tech in families, which I think is fascinating. So Aro comes with like this box. It's like looks like a decorative piece you put on a countertop that the founders say that it's wife approved. But like I try to log between 2 to 4 hours a night of RO time, which RO time is time completely and totally away from your phone. Like it's not even in your possession. It's not in your pocket. It's not on the counter. You can't hear it. You can't see it. You're away from it. And that, I think, really grounds me in the moment, and there's a lot of moments that I look around and I'm like, wow, it's hard for me to see this. And if my face was buried in my phone, I wouldn't see the rest of my family members on their phones,
Right. Right.
and
For
stuff like
sure.
that. But we try to, we're all given the same 24 hours. And I would say, we say this in our mastermind group all the time, is show me your calendar and I'll show you what's important to you. Right. So like it's today chocked full of like, work related data edge stuff. Right. But you'll find also, in my evenings that I will block out on my calendar, like family time, going fishing, hang out in the hot tub, go play soccer, go take the kids up to the park, like things like that, because I follow that calendar. And I think a lot of men follow their calendar. So if you're diligent about putting in the family activities that you want to execute, like it sounds like overkill and maybe even somewhat anal, but it gets you to do it.
Sure.
Um, so I think that's super helpful as well.
I love that. Those are great.
Yeah.
Couple of great tips right there. It's just, for try and, place some boundaries around your work if you can. And it sounds like you've kind of drawn those lines between 8 a.m. And 5 p.m. And I think by drawing those boundaries too, it'll kind of allow you and almost force you to focus more so during those hours. Cause at 5 p.m. I'm in dad mode. I'm in husband mode. They're getting 100% of me from 5 p.m. until bedtime, and then spend some time away from your device, right? Easier said than done, I think, for a lot of us. But just start small, even if it's just an hour in the morning where you don't take your phone off charge until you really need it. I know that's something that I've been implementing recently is
That's a good one.
I'll put my phone in the office, at night, because I don't like it. I don't like having it in the bedroom, because if I have it in the bedroom, I'll wake up at 2 a.m. to go to the bathroom, and then I'll start scrolling through Instagram, and then my sleep is completely screwed. So I don't do that. So we put it in the opposite room, and then I just leave it in there. I don't go. We get up at 6. We have a nice family breakfast, me and my partner and my son, and then I'll pick my phone up around 7:30. But it is just a nice hour and a half of completely off the grid, not looking at a device, being 100% present with your family. And there's just so many amazing moments in that hour and a half that I know I would miss or not be fully present for if I had my phone on me. So I think those are two pretty powerful hacks right there. And so this is Persistence Playbook. We talk a lot about persistence and work ethic and just kind of the art of grit and how to do hard things. And obviously it's, doing hard things and getting yourself to, stay active towards your goals is something that obviously, you have, to an extent mastered and it's propelling you upward. I'm curious, how do we instill, I think that it's one thing to instill self-belief in a child. And I think me growing up, I know my mother was great at instilling self-belief. Like I always believed in myself. I always knew I could do great things. But I do think there's a difference between self-belief and work ethic. And I think I got a lot of the self-belief growing up, but I've been kind of having to teach myself the work ethic as I went on, because I didn't really have that model of like absolute grinder that I saw every day because my father was not in the household. Just curious, how do you think we can best teach our children to have grit?
So I think you put them in situations where they have to build it, and also not come to like their rescue and stuff like that. I think that's a really big one, because I think it's in our DNA to protect our kids, but I think we can go overkill with that. So, like, I would say grit, like, well, first of all, if you want your kids to have grit and work ethic, well, you got to be doing it.
Sure.
Because, the best lessons are caught, not taught. Like, I can tell my kids all day long to get off their phones, but if I'm doing it while my phone's in my hand, like, that's not sending the right message. Right. One thing that, I always, fitness is a huge part of my life. It's like, it is a non-negotiable. Like, I train every day. I'm doing something, even if it's just a run. Right. But we started doing like family workouts when my two oldest were like probably in between like 8 and 10. Right. And when I say family workouts, like we would just go out in the garage and do like body weight stuff, and our goal was like, hey, let's go out and do hard things, and work up a sweat, but let's also have some fun doing it. Right. And we would cheer each other on, we push each other, and we'd go hard, and stuff like that. And to this day, like my oldest one, he's a wrestler, and he's actually at wrestling camp right now. And, he sent a photo of his face in our family chat, and he just looks like he's been hit with a bat. Like he's got a black eye here. He's got bruise here on his face. And I'm sitting there like, I was like, holy crap, dude. But I'm sitting there thinking, like, I looked at that photo and I'm like, I was just beaming with pride, because I'm like, your knucklehead friends are either, doing bad things, or they're playing video games, or they're just scrolling through Snapchat, and he's out there busting his ass because he has a goal this year. He's like, I want to go to state. I don't know. I doubt I'll win state, but I want to go to state.
I love it.
And that's what he wants to do. My 16-year-old's the same way, man. Like he will not, like, his whole life is football. Like, and he's going to be the starting center next year for his team.
Nice.
In high school. But like everything he eats, his activity, he's up early, he trains, he goes to football camp, then he goes back to the gym in the evening all by himself.
Badass.
Yeah. It's cool to see that stuff. But like, I think the thing is too, like, they see me and my wife doing that stuff.
Sure. They see
like,
you training.
those things,
they see you working hard.
those are like non-negotiables, right? And the other thing too is like their grades are good. Like, my 16-year-old, two out of the four boys had straight A's this year. My one son had one B, but like, they work hard. I'm just like, but I think you also have to like, I was in I was in leadership and management, for a decade in my full-time job. And one thing that I found is you can't really, you can motivate people by fear, but that's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Like you really have to find that black swan, right? That is in them that they're super motivated about, so like my 16-year-old, like he wants a D1 scholarship, right? Like that's his thing. And he, that's what he's gunning after. I'm like, well, if you want a D1 scholarship, you can't just be great at football. You got to have good grades, like, and where do you want to go? And what does that look like? And what's happening when you are in college and having like literally like vividly putting him in that place to where he can like see it and visualize it and be like, I'm going to do this. Right. So I think like helping them visualize, and you got to motivate them from their North Star, not our own.
Love that. Find that black swan. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think we're all, intrinsically motivated by different things. And if you can kind of pinpoint exactly what that is in your son or your daughter, you can help them motivate themselves and take more action, towards that goal that is important to them. And I think it was the book Grit by Angela Duckworth that I read, and they had a full chapter in there on kind of developing grit in children.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember all the bullet points, but I do remember one thing that they said was, if your child does join some type of extracurricular activity, and let's say that they kind of wind up hating it, it's imperative that you make them finish the season. Whether it's karate or whether it's basketball, and maybe they hate it, you go, it's all right, you started. You got to finish, and then we can reevaluate after if you want to do it again. But just making them finish what they start, at least the research says that's imperative for helping your children develop that work ethic muscle.
1,000%. There's one other thing too, Carol Dweck, she wrote, I think it was the growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
We made this mistake early on that we would, give accolades to our kids and words of affirmation based on results. So like, and this really slapped us in the face in not a good way. So my 16-year-old used to wrestle, and he was a badass wrestler, like 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old. He went like almost undefeated, went to state. And we'd always applaud him, for his results. And as soon as he started like, hitting some really hard competition, he kind of like lost the fire for it and the love for it, I think. Just because like we would applaud him for results. And like, so I had a really fascinating podcast guest come on and talk about growth mindset and grit and work ethic. And he's like, and I couldn't figure out why he didn't want to wrestle anymore. And the Navy SEAL was like, you really don't know why? And I'm like, no. He's like, his entire worth is based on his results, not the work, his results. So he's going to hate wrestling because the competition's heavier now. And it was really fascinating because my 16-year-old's older brother, my oldest, was also a little league wrestler, and he was the opposite. He won like maybe 4 matches the entire season out of like 40 matches, but he kept coming back, and like he would just we had nothing to praise him on except for the work. And which was really weird because we're like, oh my God, like, well, how do we build this kid back up again? Well, we could like, he didn't give up, and he was faster this time, and he did this. Like, it was all about the work. And sure enough, man, like now, he always joked when he was in Little League wrestling. It was like, he's like, I have PTSD. I lost so much. It was horrible. Right. But it taught him work ethic.
Sure.
And now like, so 3 years, when he was a sophomore, he's going to be a senior now. He came to us and he's like, I think I'm going to go out for the wrestling team. And we're like, what? Like, you're going to go out for the wrestling team? You said you hated it. He's like, yeah. He's like, I think I'm going to give it another try. And he's a freaking, he's a savage at wrestling now. And it's really fascinating. We're like, what? We even asked him, like, what was it about? Like, he's like, I don't know. He's like, I wasn't winning, so I couldn't celebrate that. The thing I could hang my hat on is I would never give up. Like I would never roll on my back and give up, and I would just work my ass off. And sure enough, like work, praise the work, and now suddenly like he's doing really, really well. But I think that you've got to praise kids, not give them lip service, right? But you can't just simply praise them for a result, right? To some degree, yes, but you've got to, I mean, shine the spotlight as hard as you can, as bright as you can on the work it took to get the result, not the result
Oh,
itself.
I love that. That is really powerful stuff. And I think we can all use that advice on ourselves as well. Praise ourselves for sitting down and working for 8 hours. And, maybe the podcast episode flopped, but don't attach yourself to that result. Just shine the spotlight on the amount of work you did today. And it'll make it more likely that you're able to show up and do that work again tomorrow. I think Stephen Pressfield talks about that in that famous book, right? About the war of art, when he talks about the resistance, and he's like, I sat down at my desk and I wrote for 5 hours, and I have no idea if any of it was good or if it was totally trash, but you know what? I stayed focused and I gave it my all. And that's all that matters for today. And I think as, business owners or really anyone, if we could just kind of take that mindset towards our work, we get a lot farther. We get a lot farther as opposed to just comparing ourselves to everyone else out there and just looking at the results. And, we're going to wrap up here pretty soon, but I wanted to talk about something towards the end. And obviously you're a guy who's, pretty comfortable talking real talking about his emotions, about his past, and in a very vulnerable sense. But I would say most men, if they have one friend that they can actually talk to about their real life, then they're doing better than 90% of men out there. And I'm just curious, why do you think it's so tough these days for men to be vulnerable with each other?
So I think we kind of get out of practice and we forget, and we want to put on like this persona, right? I saw this video and I thought it was so true that every man needs three men in his life. Number one, you have to have a man in your life who is like a vault, right? The one who, like, we all have secrets. We all have dark things that we've done or said or whatever. And you've got to be able to unpack that with somebody. You can't hold that kind of stuff in, but you have to have a friend in your life that's like a vault, right? We'll never share things that are super personal or things that you're not proud of. The second man is the one who is honest, right? The one who will call you. I don't like the term call out, because I think when you hear that, you think of someone who's being really disrespectful. But I do like the term call forward. They know that whatever it is that you're doing, they know that you're better than that, right? They want better for you, even if you can't see it. So they'll call you forward, right? Call you out, right? And then the third friend is the 3 a.m. friend. And it's staggering. I think it's, only 12% of men can say that they have a 3 a.m. friend. Like if something catastrophic happens in your life, they actually have someone that they could call. So why do I think it's hard? I think it's hard because, like, if you really think about, like high school and college, right? Like those are the years we have like our closest friends, and it's easy for us to make friends. But if you think about it, like we're all on the same playing field when we're in high school and college, right? We're all freaking dirt poor. We're all away from home. We're all taking classes. Like we have some serious common ground. And it's when I've seen this cycle happen, and Stephen Mansfield calls it rusty relationships. And that is when a guy graduates college, gets married, settles down, has a kid, suddenly he goes into a cocoon and he's in one of two places at all times. He's either at work or he is with family, period. There's nothing outside of that. And a lot of that has to do with, like, well, guilt, or they assume or perceive everybody else is so busy, so I don't want to bother them. So, like, there's some of their closest friendships are become what Stephen Mansfield calls rusty, right? It's not an iron sharpens iron like that's on my shirt, right? It's a very rusty relationship where every conversation and every question can be answered with good, fine, busy, right? And I think that that's a miss, because men, you know we do better in community. We do better in tribes. I just hosted one of our mastermind sessions this morning, and we had a guy who was in a really bad funk last Thursday, and we ended up spending about 25 minutes on some of the things that he was struggling with. And then he came back today, and we were like, hey man, like, how's your week been? And he was just like, I cannot even begin to tell you how helpful that was. I was able to get out of that funk by the end of the day. And if I didn't have this community, and if I didn't have this group, and if I didn't have men like you guys in my life, I would have carried what I was carrying around last Thursday for a month. He's like, because that was my pattern. And I'm like, God bless. I was like, so like you think about the benefits of just men being in community with other like, and the key term is like-minded men. Like we can learn faster, we can become smarter, we can become more aware. Valleys, not the peaks, but the valleys in our life will be much shorter, right? You can actually get to the peak faster if you're going with people, right? Um, when people hold you to a higher standard and hold you accountable, like, and you can't hide, that's a really good environment. And I think, but I also think that that somewhat intimidates
For
a
sure.
lot of guys,
For sure.
you know,
Right. I love that. Don't let those relationships get rusty. And I think,
rusty.
yeah, and maybe, I think it's easy for us to make the excuse that we're guilty about, not spending the time at work or not spending the time with our family. But the truth is, if we do make an effort to spend some time around like-minded men that we do respect, we're going to have more love and just more of us to pour into our family, to pour into our work, because we're going to draw from those experiences. So I think that's a powerful mindset shift there. Larry, thank you for being with us today, man. This was an awesome conversation. And, I really respect everything that you're up to right now. And, where can everyone keep up with what you got going on these days?
Everything's the dad edge. So Instagram, and we got a Facebook page as well. You can follow me on the socials there. You can always shoot me a message. Larry Hagner. My name is unique. It's not very common, so I'm super easy to find. But yeah, everybody can always start with the podcast. There's like 1,200 episodes. There's enough content to keep you busy there for a good year or two. If you want more, we've got two different programs. One's called the Alliance. That's just, Dad Edge Alliance. We've had that program since 2016. That's for what we call like our 9 to 5ers. And then we have the Dad Edge Business Boardroom, which is for our business owners. So those are our two programs that if you want to find out more about that, you can just go to thedadedge.com/mastermind.
There it is. Check it out, guys. Larry, thank you for your time. And everyone out there, this has been Persistence Playbook, and we'll catch you next week. Larry, thank you, brother. That was a lot of fun, man.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Are you in the Northeast?
Yeah. I'm actually in New Jersey. Yeah.
I figured.
Yeah.
I almost said I almost actually said, "Are you in Pennsylvania or Jersey?" Because like I can hear
So
it.
I got the accent going on, the Pennsylvania Jersey accent a little bit.
A little bit,
all right.
Yeah. I
could be worse.
It's a good one. I mean, like, you're not here in St. Louis where we don't say fork, we say fark, and we wash our clothes in the washing machine.
Nice.
I have no idea.
Washing machine.
Yeah,
cool. I haven't heard that one.
machine.
That's awesome.
We like to add in R's and O's.